Business Translated, CNN Business.
I'm back with the breaking news, and there is reaction to the revelations from Jenny Rassicot. As you just heard her in our interview, Democrats already reacting to what she said Graham Platner did to her in 2021 when they were dating. He showed up at her house uninvited, intoxicated, and according to her, raped her. Platner categorically denied what he's calling false allegations of any non-consensual behavior. In a video that he posted on social media today, here's an excerpt of that.
Regardless of the inaccuracy of the reporting, but mindful of the political reality it will inflict, we are taking the time to reflect on the best path forward for the state that I love, the people that I love, the movement I belong to, and the goal of defeating Susan Collins. Those were the goals when we launched this campaign, and they remain my goals today.
Our panel is here in studio. We have Julie Rodzinski and Alyssa Farah-Griffin, and in D.C. we have Lulu Garcia-Navarro. So let me start with the fact that reacting to Jenny Rassicot's interview today, two prominent Democrats have withdrawn their endorsements of Platner, Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego and California Congressman Ro Khanna, both of them major backers of Platner. And the main Democratic Party leadership is now calling for Platner to withdraw, saying they, quote, stand with women and survivors and that principle does not bend based on party affiliation. Julie, obviously, this isn't the first scandal he's weathered. There is the Totenkopf tattoo, which, by the way, we didn't include it in the interview because it was a big interview and she said a lot of important stuff, but she said she saw it, but she didn't know what it was. It was just, to her, it was just a skull and crossbones, if anybody was wondering. But he's had other scandals. What is it about this that makes it different, do you think, for people like Gallego and the main Democratic Party to be saying he should leave?
That's a great question. I don't know, because it shouldn't be anything different. We are a party that claims to believe women. We are a party that claims to be the party of Me Too. And all of a sudden, what it means to be a Democrat these days, apparently, is a noun, a verb, and AIPAC sucks, right? That's all it takes to get some people to fall behind somebody like a Graham Platner. These are not new allegations. Multiple women had come forward previously. I don't know why they weren't believed. And for Ro Khanna, who I think has done the Lord's work on the Epstein files, why he believes those women, but for some reason did not believe enough the previous women to withdraw his endorsement way before today, is puzzling to me. It doesn't make any sense to me as to why a man who went on blogs and criticized black people, criticized women, had a problematic tattoo that he claims either he did not know was a Nazi symbol or is lying that he didn't know was a Nazi symbol, why none of that was enough to withdraw their endorsement. So look, I look at these people today and now all of a sudden, you know, this is the straw that broke the camel's back, but why is this the straw that broke the camel's back? Why is it that when a Republican came forward with allegations that were similar, all of a sudden, well, she's a Republican, we don't believe her? Since when does anybody ask for your voter registration before they harass you? They don't. And so I'm glad that it looks like he's going to be out. I'm glad that he's not going to be the Democratic standard bearer, but I implore my party to do better than just to get on board with somebody who throws AIPAC, AIPAC, AIPAC as a talking point, and that apparently is enough to excuse every other problem that he's ever had in his life. And that's not just Graham Platner, it's a lot of other candidates too.
To be clear, he has not withdrawn.
Not yet.
And you know, it doesn't just, you know, two endorsees withdrawing their support in the main Democratic Party saying no doesn't mean he will, but I understand where you're coming from. You're reading the tea leaves. What was your reaction to the interview, Alyssa?
I thought that it was credible. It was heartbreaking to listen to. It's devastating to listen to a woman recount that. But I really appreciate you mentioning Lindsay Fifield, who also came forward to the New York Times and talked about different allegations, but allegations of what I would consider emotional abuse and physical abuse that she endured from Graham Platner. He denied those allegations, but her claims were ignored by many prominent Democrats. Why? Because she's a Republican operative. I've known her for nearly 20 years. I believe her claims, those were credible. This woman, this is even more devastating, and regardless of how she voted, those are credible. But it should have been enough when he insulted Purple Heart recipients, when he made homophobic slurs, that he had a Nazi tattoo. When it becomes winning at all costs, and I've seen this in my own party, I call it out when it's Republicans too, you end up elevating some of the worst people. This should be a moment of reflection. And by the way, I do think he will drop out because there's a narrow window that Democrats can replace him with somebody who doesn't have all of this baggage. There's about a week that they can act and do that, and I think that's very much the direction the party should go.
Lulu, in Platner's campaign statement, it reads in part, quote, "These allegations are very serious and Graham vigorously denies them. They were also coached and coordinated by out-of-state establishment operatives. Now, that's not accurate, but there is a group that's been, that Jenny Rascott describes as helping her. It's a group called Reckoning America. It's launched by a Democratic lawyer named Cheyenne Hunt, who we've had on the show before. She helped coordinate survivors who alleged various horrific acts by former Congressman Eric Swalwell over sexual abuse allegations. And what Jenny Rascott says is that Cheyenne Hunt reached out to her and to provide her help, to provide her with resources and counseling and that sort of thing. But she did reach out. What do you make of Graham Platner's campaign basically attacking this group trying to help survivors of sexual abuse?
It sounds like the desperate gasp of a dying campaign. I mean, this is not the first allegation. This is not the second allegation. This is a series now of allegations that are credible, that have been well reported in the mainstream media with reporters who have investigated them, who have corroborated the information. And now this woman is coming out publicly to you and to others to tell her story. And so at this point, I do not see a path forward for Graham Platner and his campaign. And, you know, the question here is, what did they know and when did they know it? Because the campaign has seen these allegations swirling for quite some time. I interviewed Graham Platner before all of these allegations came out. I asked him point blank if anything else was coming his way, and he denied it. But this clearly is not news to them that this was coming.
You know, Alyssa, one of the other things I asked Jenny that didn't make this cut, because we were, you know, we taped it and we came here and it was trying to make the slot, trying to make air. But one of the things that I did ask her about is, like, would things have been different if at any point Graham Platner had come to you and taken any ownership of what happened? You heard her describe how the next morning she said, you know, you don't remember what you did last night, and he didn't, according to her, he didn't ask her what it was, he just left. And then she texted him a few weeks later after she realized she, you know, wasn't pregnant with his child, given what happened in the alleged rape, and again said a similar thing, and he didn't ask her what happened. She was in the New York Times about a month ago, a vague description of a horrible night. Didn't go into detail, but a vague description of a horrible night after which they never talked again. And he could have reached out after that. And she said basically that she didn't know. She had thought about that too, but she didn't know. But one of the things that strikes me after talking to her is that the act was horrific, and then the lack of accountability was also horrific.
That stood out to me as well. Listen, this is an issue of character. There has been an effort by his campaign to try to pin this on his PTSD. I've worked with veterans who have PTSD. That does not excuse, nor would they hide behind excusing it to commit what are actually crimes. These allegations, it's a crime, what she is accusing him of. And to hide behind that, I think, is incredibly wrong. I also want to underscore that rape and sexual assault are some of the most underreported crimes because victims come forward and they know that they're often not going to be believed. And so is domestic violence. And I think the fact that in that New York Times piece, which was carefully reported, I have some issues with how it was covered, that Lindsay Fifield came forward with what she said there, and there were so many who were so quick to discredit what she said purely because of political reasons. I hope that that is not done now to this woman who put herself out there and is going to have to, for the rest of her life, have this story follow her, that people will believe her, and we will actually stand by it when we say we believe all women. It won't be partisan. It won't be based on how you vote in the voting booth.
Yeah, and people can listen to her story and decide whether or not they want to believe it. I personally found her story very compelling and very credible. And I know from having been trying to get her to talk to me, even just, you know, on background or for a CNN.com digital piece, that she's been very reluctant to do this, very reluctant to do this. And talk about that, if you would, Julie, just like how difficult it is for people to do this.
I came forward against the former chairman and CEO of Fox News, Roger Ailes, about being sexually harassed by him, allegedly, I have to say that, about almost a decade ago. And I will tell you, it is incredibly difficult. Nobody does this for fun. This is an incredibly, especially when something is as high profile and the perpetrator, alleged perpetrator, is as high profile as Graham Platner is, as high profile as Roger Ailes was. this is no fun. And you don't do this unless you really feel compelled to do it. And I am a Democrat. When I came forward, I heard a lot of the same thing that Lindsay Fifield heard, which is, oh, she's a Democrat. She's doing this to bring down, this Republican right-leaning organization. No, you do it because it's the last alternative that you have. Most people do everything possible not to come forward. I now run a nonprofit called Lift Our Voices that deals with these kinds of issues all the time. I have spoken to probably over 1,000 women in the last decade, and let me tell you something. They don't ever talk to anybody about this because they're worried they're not going to be believed. They have documentation, they have recordings, and they still don't come forward because they're worried they're not going to be believed. So I implore my party, the party that is making a very big deal about Jeffrey Epstein right now, please believe women, irrespective of whether the person they're bringing down is your political hero, irrespective of whether you agree with him on Gaza, or you agree with him on billionaires, or you agree with him on marginal tax rates, or universal health care. If you're Bernie Sanders, if you're Ro Khanna, surely whatever you saw in somebody like Graham Platner could not be more important than the survivors who told you time and again what was happening. This is not new. This is the part that enrages me, and this is the part that disappoints me. What happened today was the last straw, but it shouldn't have been the last straw. This is years of documented misbehavior, and yet because he wasn't a Chuck Schumer acolyte, because he wasn't somebody who AIPAC supported, all of a sudden this is somebody that had to get behind. You can't find somebody else in the entire state of Maine who's not a Chuck Schumer acolyte or somebody that AIPAC supports. It had to be this very flawed candidate. Why? And look, in this rush to turn the page on the current establishment in the Democratic Party, they're not doing the vetting they need to do, and they're not taking seriously allegations that women are coming forward with, people of color are coming forward with, and so on and so forth. It's not just in Maine, it's here in New York City and other places as well.
And Lulu, I can't help but think about Congressman Jake Auchincloss from Massachusetts refused to endorse Platner from the state just to his north, and he got a lot of heat from Democrats. A lot of heat from Democrats for that. There is definitely, when it comes to partisan politics, and certainly the Republican Party is guilty of this as well, and we've been covering that for 10 years now. But he must not feel good today, but he must feel at least a bit like he doesn't have to rescind any endorsements today.
No, he doesn't. And I think to the broader point of where does this leave the Democratic Party, I think it leaves them in a very, very difficult position. They have a week to determine who else might run for this race if indeed Graham Platner drops out of this race, as seems likely from his own statement. And beyond that, I do think that there is some soul searching that needs to happen about exactly what kind of candidates the party is putting forward while it looks to retake political power. So, this is a very, very serious and very important moment where I think a lot of people are going to be doing some soul searching.
All right, thanks to our panel. Not an easy conversation, but an important